Greetings and welcome to the Health Data Ethics Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Owens. And in today's episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about three unrelated things that happened to me today. Or I guess perhaps this weekend. So I was having a conversation with my mother, who, despite not having a Facebook account, is an avid user of Instagram. And she asked me, Jenny, why are so many of the people I follow telling me they will send me a recipe if I direct message them? She says, I see, just drop the word pancakes into my DMs and I'll send you the recipes. And I explained a little bit about, trying to engage with Instagram's algorithm to make sure that you're getting the reach and the boost that you're looking for. And she kind of accepted that example, and we went about our normal family weekend. This morning, I was reading an article on long COVID and reading the comments on the article on long COVID. And I noticed that out of the article commenters, probably 75% of the commenters either self-identified as having long COVID or self-identified as having high levels of anxiety about developing long COVID. And I thought, well, this is really interesting because clearly I am the target audience for this article about long COVID because here I am reading it. But also, I cannot remember the last time that anybody in my actual physical life mentioned either having long COVID or fearing getting long COVID. And I thought about that for a little bit. And I thought about some reasons why I might not hear about that. But I do work in healthcare. So I do think that, I have a higher than baseline level chance of hearing about people's fears of long COVID or people's experiences with long COVID. Not to say that I'm doubting that long COVID exists. That's not the question. I was just really struck by the delta between the commenters on the internet and my physical relationships. The third thing that happened this weekend was that I was preparing for performance evaluation season. I manage a group of people, and as part of preparing for their annual performance reviews, I was looking at survey responses. We sent out a number of different surveys to try to get at how satisfied are people with ITD in general, how satisfied are people with their BRM in particular. And I was looking at the survey responses and noticing a real difference in how the survey responses broke out across the various areas that we serve. Some areas had high levels of response. Some areas had almost no responses at all. So these three unrelated things happened this weekend. And as I was drinking my coffee this morning, I was sitting here thinking a lot about data, as I frequently do. I was thinking a lot about data and our assumptions. And although I like to think that we're all pretty savvy scientists, we don't make the baseline assumption that our data sets are representative, right? We know that our data sets are not representative. But it's easier when you're the generator of the data to account for this, right? When you're writing your paper, you can put your table 1 together and then you can say, this table 1 shows bias in several different ways. We have an overrepresentation of this demographic group, underrepresentation of this demographic group. And you can account for that, at least in your narrative. But when you're not using your own data, when you're using open source data, when you're using data that you've inherited, data from previous, maybe internal reporting, data that you got by reaching out to the author of a paper, maybe you're working with census data, there's any number of data sets that you get where you might not really be aware of who is or isn't in your data. And this is the part where I always start to feel a little bit, and I'm going to date myself very precisely here, I start to feel a little bit like the peasant in Monty Python on the Holy Grail. The one who's in the stream, just kind of like smacking the stream with the board. And he's talking about how, strange women lying in ponds is no basis for government. And he says, come and see the bias inherent in the system. So I think a lot about the bias inherent in the system, right? About how Instagram is biased for content creators who encourage their followers to engage with Instagram more. That does not necessarily benefit the content creators, right? Who may have recipes they are trying to do, or like items of clothing they're trying to sell, or whatever it is that people, use Instagram for. I think about the bias inherent in the comment sections of news articles, right? Where people who are afraid of long COVID, who may not be leaving their house, who may be starved for human connection, maybe very reasonably could be overrepresented in that particular space. And in my physical life, we don't spend a lot of time talking about health concerns. We don't spend a lot of time talking about health fears. So it's entirely reasonable that I would tend to underrate the prevalence of long COVID and fears of long COVID, and a internet article comment section would tend to overrate the presence of long COVID and the fears of long COVID. And when you're prepping for performance reviews, looking at survey response data, I don't even know where to begin with breaking down all the ways that there is bias inherent in that system, right? We're biased towards people who have 5 minutes to take a survey. We're biased towards people who will make 5 minutes to take a survey. We're biased towards people who want to share their thoughts freely versus get another email out of their inbox. So I think a lot about legacy. I think a lot about the next generation of people trying to do my job and of people who are trying to work with this data. And I think it would be helpful if all data sets came with kind of a nutrition facts panel, right? In academic publications, you see this referred to really often as a table one, right? Table one is your table of demographics of your participants. Are they male? Are they female? Are they white? Are they Black? Are they Asian? How do their ages break down? How do their health conditions break down? And then this could be really helpful information to kind of write along with any data set. It should not be difficult to pull. And then it would also be really helpful if you could get not only the nutrition facts, but also the recommended daily values of the data set for that particular population. So if you are interested, for example, in representative data about patients who suffer from a particular cardiac condition, you should have your table one of data in the data set. This many men, this many women, here's our racial breakdown, here's our age breakdown. And then you should be able to bump that up against actually, our population level data suggests that the demographics of the population who suffer from this condition are this many men, this many women, this many Black, this many white, this many Asian, so that you can compare. Okay, so I have a I have a bag of fruit snacks here, right? I have a little data set. It contains some vitamin C, it contains some sugar. This bag of fruit snacks is not representative of the set of all fruit, right? It shares some characteristics, but in other ways it's going to differ wildly. So this is kind of what I'm chewing on here is if we were to institute a standard labeling or standard information to provide about a data set, good information to archive along with your data, what would be included and how would you go about standardizing that?